It's a personal pleasure for me to be introducing Dr. Peter May, longtime friend and supporter, and somebody who has done so much, I think, for our movement in terms of what he writes and how he argues. Peter May trained in medicine in London and worked as a family doctor in Southampton for 30 years. He's been an outspoken critic of unscientific alternative therapies and fraudulent healers. In retirement, he co-authored with Dermot O'Callaghan the Core Issues Trust book, Beyond Critique, the Misuse of Science by UK Professional Mental Health Bodies. He was a member of the Church of England's General Synod for 25 years, and he and his wife Heather have just celebrated their golden wedding anniversary. They have 4 children and 16 grandchildren. Well done, Peter.
I'm not altogether sure it's 16 grandchildren. I haven't counted for several days. You'll be pleased to know this is, I've taken a slightly different approach to things. I want to tell you a story rather than give you a whole lot more statistics and facts to wrestle with. And many of the things, the important points have been so well flagged up already. Sexuality is in crisis. Where has the science been? It seemed to go missing. This is a very strange world we're now in, where you can choose your own gender, but are prevented from choosing the direction of your desires. Professor Michael King died in September, and he was a key player in these sexuality debates. A psychiatrist and epidemiologist in the Faculty of Brain Sciences at University College London. His research interests included the role of religious beliefs in mental well-being and the stress and stigma faced by homosexuals. A gay man himself, and a professing Christian, he entered a civil partnership in 2006 and gay marriage in 2017. As a member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, he chaired the college's special interest group in homosexuality. And in 2012, he oversaw the production of the college submissions to the Church of England's Pilling Commission and the Home Office consultation on equal civil marriage, as well as various college position papers that came out from time to time on sex and gender. He also produced a briefing paper for members of the Church of England's General Synod before their 2017 debate, supporting Joan Azan's motion calling for a ban on conversion therapy. This was a poor debate. Having sat through 25 years of Synod debates, this one really didn't rate. It seemed that very few people had a grip of the issues that were being thrown around. Jesus taught clearly. Have you not read that in the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and that a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? And what therefore God has joined together, man must not separate. But Jesus continued, and this part of it is, I think, very important. He said, not everyone can accept this teaching. Only those to whom it's given. Well, who are they? Surely his disciples, those who hear his voice and choose to follow him and put their faith in him into practice in their lives. These sexuality issues are non-negotiable core issues for Christian people. And even when we fail, Christians know that we're called to be faithful to our wives, to nurture our own children, to care for the weak and the elderly. And every Christian knows that the family unit is fundamental to human flourishing. If the Church of England's bishops do not teach these things, their flock will continue to look elsewhere for faithful leaders. But in King's view, sexual orientation was not a choice. He believed its causes were biological in nature, determined by genetic factors and hormones in the womb. He was adamant there's no good evidence to show that the nature of parenting or a history of early childhood abuse had any role in shaping sexual orientation. Once formed, he maintained it could not be changed. It was innate. To attempt to change it was both unethical and potentially harmful. This false dogma, propagated by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, was a major public argument in the campaign to legalise gay marriage. King was highly influential, and he brought into being a memorandum of understanding calling UK mental health bodies to prohibit counsellors from practising what they chose to call conversion therapy. King chose to call in the memorandum. The definition of such conversion therapy has been an ongoing source of contention. It's clearly true that some 50 years ago, appalling therapies were available, and people, because homosexual acts were against the law, they were coerced into taking whatever help they could find. But since the 1970s, the only therapies that have been available in the National Health Service have been conversational therapies, where skilled counsellors can explore their clients' hopes and fears and support them in achieving their own chosen desires and outcomes. In April 2013, my colleague Dermot O'Callaghan and I wrote on behalf of Core Issues Trust and enclosed a copy of the book that Mike just mentioned. We wrote to Professor Sue Bailey, who was president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, seeking clarification on numerous matters of concern to us. We claimed the college submission to the government was founded on gay ideology rather than science, and it was written by an author with undeclared interests, distorting science to achieve political ends. These were very serious accusations. We concluded our letter by saying, we do not want to misrepresent the college. We realise these matters have international implications, and many doctors and therapists look to the college for guidance and leadership. We want to give you the opportunity to respond before we take matters further. We'd be very happy to meet with you and discuss these issues if that would be helpful. Professor Bailey did not reply at all. Some 2 months later, we had a letter from the college registrar, Dr. Lawrence Miners-Wallace, saying, I do not propose to enter into a discussion about sexuality. Surely this silencing of debate was an early sign of our current deplatforming cancel culture. So in 2015, following a campaign by the General Medical Council to encourage NHS whistleblowers to speak up when they encountered unprofessional behaviour, we took our grievances to them, claiming that the college had an ethical obligation to address serious matters of scientific dispute raised in their own publications. The GMC replied, it's unfortunate that the doctors have been unwilling to engage in discourse. And we understand this may be frustrating. We appreciate that you're dissatisfied with the contents of the reports, in particular that they may have influenced policy making. But the GMC is not the appropriate forum for dealing with these matters, and we will not be taking any further action. if not the GMC, who else? They made no other suggestion as to who we should turn to. So if we have misunderstood the college's statements, it was not without a serious attempt of clarification as to what they meant and what the science was that they were relying on. The major issues of concern have been mapped out for us today, but they include that orientation is, if it is biological and innate, why do studies of identical twins not support this? Why has extensive genetic research not found any evidence of a gay gene? Secondly, it is common that adolescents experience a phase of emotional or physical attraction to members of their own sex. If this happened to, say, 40% of teenagers, it seems that only 1 or 2% develop any settled homosexual orientation. Thirdly, there's been a growing body of evidence that many adults are attracted to both sexes. This was shown in the Ipsos Mori poll, for instance, this year in February. Does this sexual fluidity, especially common in those under 25 years of age, not mean that such adolescence, assuming adolescence continues to about the age of 25, which I think is certainly the driving insurers believe that people behave differently under the age of 25. Does it mean that such adolescents have a real choice as to the way they go forward? The college position statement of April 2014 stated, "There is no evidence to impute any kind of choice into the origins of sexual orientation. There is no sound scientific evidence that sexual orientation can be changed." So fourthly, does that mean that there's no sound scientific evidence that it cannot be changed? Fifthly, when I was a medical student, we were taught that brain development was completed around the age of about 21. But over the past generation, there's been increasing recognition that the brain is in fact plastic, meaning that its nerve pathways and connections are not fixed and set, but go on developing and are molded even into old age. Learning to play a musical instrument, learning a new language, developing any new skills, they're all very much easier to do in early adult life, but they can still be achieved even after retirement. Such things do not happen overnight, but occur with practice and perseverance over a long passage of time. Why has there been no public discussion about the role of neuroplasticity in retraining and redirecting sexual responsiveness? Would cognitive behavioral therapy not be of help? And by the same mechanism, is not pornography highly destructive? Sixth, in exploring the stories of homosexual people experiencing, many of them experience physical absence or emotional distance from their same-sex parent. This is very common. And this lack of affection, affirmation, bonding, role modeling for the same-sex parent appears to find compensation for some anyway in same-sex relationships. This is described very powerfully in celebrity biographies, and I'm thinking now of Elton John and Freddie Mercury, which this was a big factor for them. Elton John didn't even attend the funeral of his father. But also, it's there in the everyday stories of people that we've been collected and put into the X Out Loud booklet. Follow that thread through the book and just see the role of the parental relationships. 7, rewarding sexual behaviors can be very addictive, and pornography is a prime example. Change can occur, but clients need to be well motivated and require ongoing support and encouragement. And as addicts know only too well, the possibility of relapse is a constant reality. The talk of cure is quite inappropriate. I once asked a psychiatrist friend for advice about the prognosis of an abuser who was a spanker. And he replied memorably, in my clinical experience, once a spanker, always a spanker. It evidently provides a particular thrill and gratification. And child abusers can be very resistant to treatment. But aren't these practices much better understood to be rewarding addictive behaviours rather than innate dispositions? In 2003, King himself documented the increased psychological distress experienced within the gay community, their drug and alcohol abuse and their self-harm. He was sympathetic to their needs, but he was stone deaf to the cries of those who wanted help to move away from the gay community for any of many good reasons. 9, finally, I'll stop the list at this point. Is transgender dysphoria acquired, or is that innate? This neglected matter has now become a major social issue. The Royal College of Psychiatrists' winter newsletter of 2019, called The Psychiatric Eye, published an interview with Professor King. The final question was put by Dr. Shakim Shah, was what are the most important areas for future research? And King replied, one of the key things I would do is to understand the natural history of discontent with gender, and feeling that your gender identity is at odds with that assigned at birth. That would be very important. And the other important thing to understand is much more about sexual orientation. It's quite obvious that it's much more of a spectrum than we've hitherto thought. Terrific, isn't it? He goes on, what appears to be coming from the most recent studies of young people is that there's a certain flow and flux along a spectrum. And it's much more likely that sexuality is on a spectrum. It'd be really helpful to understand that many people have sexual responsiveness to the same or other sex, and it doesn't classify them as being a certain type of person for their lives. Our questions in our 2013 book, Beyond Critique, subtitled When Ideology Replaces Science, were clearly on target. And the refusal of the Royal College of Psychiatry even to discuss these issues was a major dereliction of duty on their part. The GMC was impotent to intervene. And now, in the light of King's astonishing volte-face, does the college still believe that orientation is innate? And are the Church of England and the British government still of a mind to join Stonewall's international campaign to ban counselling therapy? And in so doing, to ban freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and freedom of choice? Thank you.